Did you know that white people were slaves too? All right, so thank you for tuning in to Bona Fide Church. You can check out our website at bonafidechurch.com and like, share, and subscribe to this channel and share this video with anybody it could help. So today we are destroying an Israelite claim that is based in Deuteronomy chapter 28, because we are proving that Deuteronomy 28 does not prove Israelite bloodline. In other words, just because you went into slavery, that does not make you an Israelite. So, here's the first opening blow, right? This is important. This is the first opening blow to that argument. White people were slaves too. Any race-exclusive slavery argument collapses the moment the broader record is examined. Let me zoom in here a little bit. I might just try to zoom in and out so you can see this stuff a little better as we go through it. So white people were slaves too. So any race-exclusive slavery argument collapses the moment the broader record is examined. So what this is talking about, you have Israelite camps or groups, and they'll be on the street or online, and they'll be saying that Deuteronomy 28 proves that black people, Hispanics, and Native Americans are Israelites because they're the only ones that went through slavery. And while the slavery of our people was brutal in this country, right, in the Americas, in the Western Hemisphere, we were not the only people who went through slavery. That's just it, and that's all. White Europeans were enslaved, raided, ransomed, trafficked, and forced into long systems of unfree labor. Slavery is therefore too widespread to serve as an exclusive proof of ethnic or biblical identity. So, the slogan sounds powerful only until history starts talking. So we're not going to play games with just propaganda and slogans. We're going to see what the history proves. A narrow claim cannot survive a broad historical record. All right, now, next point. The core claim falls apart fast. Some arguments, let me zoom back in. So bear with me if I have to zoom in and out and scroll left and right. I just want you to be able to see everything plainly. Some arguments speak as if slavery belonged to one race alone. That is not history. It is selective storytelling dressed up as certainty. You see that? Conquest, piracy, debt, punishment, and political domination dragged many peoples into bondage across centuries and civilization. So here's the bottom line. If the standard fits too many peoples, it cannot prove one people alone. That's the point. All right. The more history enters the room, the weaker the exclusive claim becomes. Now, let's get to this next point. North Africa captured and sold Europeans. Yes, you read that and heard that right. From the 1500s through the 1700s and into the early 1800s, slave systems in Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, and Moroccan ports captured large numbers of Europeans. You understand? So they were not exempt from slavery. Victims came from ships at sea. Yes, ships at sea, because I know them brothers love to mention Deuteronomy 28 and 68 talking about the slave ships. Well, these victims came from ships at sea and from raids on coastal communities in Spain, Portugal, Italy, France, Ireland, England, and even Iceland. They were chained, sold, ransomed, labored, and sometimes held for years inside North African and Ottoman-connected systems of slavery. So here's the debate point. White Europeans were not outside slavery. They were sold in it. That is a historical fact. Now, I'm not saying their slavery was in the Americas as brutal as ours was in the Americas. What I'm telling you, they were enslaved nonetheless. This was not folklore or exaggeration. It was a functioning slave system. All right, let's get to the next point. The numbers are debated. The reality is not. Historian Robert C. Davis popularized an estimate of roughly 1 to 1.25 million Europeans enslaved in the Barbary system between about 1530 and 1780. So that means from 1 million up to about 1,250,000 Europeans. Now that's not as many as the 12.5 million estimated Africans, Moors, and or Israelites brought into the Americas, but that's still too many people to overlook. You understand? If you had 1 million plus people enslaved, that means you were slaves too. Other historians question how precise that total can be because surviving records are incomplete and the movement, ransom, and resale of captives often went poorly documented. But even when the exact total is debated, the larger conclusion remains firmly intact. European enslavement in North Africa was large scale, repeated, and historically undeniable. Here's our verification note. A disputed estimate is not the same thing as a disputed event. So you might not know exactly how many millions of them were enslaved, but we know it was enough to be significant, right? So the often cited estimate comes from Robert C. Davis. It's about Christian slaves, Muslim masters. The exact totals remain debated because the record is incomplete. But still, the exact count may be argued, but the existence of the system cannot honestly be denied. All right. Next point. White women were sold into sexual slavery too. So similar to how they did our women over here in America, they did white women like that over there. The record does not stop with male laborers or rowers. Women and girls were also captured in Mediterranean raids and sold into bondage in North Africa and nearby Ottoman connected regions. All right, next point. Historical studies of captivity and harem slavery. A harem is a group of wives that one man has. So some of those Muslims, Arab Muslims or whatever, they might have had 5 wives, 7 wives, and concubines. So they were capturing or enslaving white women to make them part of their harem, their concubines or wives. So harem slavery described female captives being absorbed into households as domestic slaves, servants, and concubines. Just like they did over here in America to us, they were doing it over there to them. Just wasn't quite as many of them, right? Exact totals for white women sold specifically as concubines are hard to verify because records often fail to separate captives by age, sex, or sexual use. But the practice itself is documented, and the wider Ottoman world is well known for the trafficking of white women, including Slavic, Greek, Circassian, and other European women. Here's a hard fact. White womanhood did not place women beyond the reach of slave traders, sexual exploitation, or concubinage. So, the strongest historical claim is the existence of the practice. Precise numerical totals for concubinage remain uncertain. The system exploited labor, captivity, domestic service, and sexuality. All right. Next, the etymology cuts straight through the claim. So we're going to look at the etymology of the word slave. All right. So I'm going to zoom in even more for this one, then I'll zoom back out. The English word slave is historically linked to Slav. Y'all understand? Because large numbers of Slavic and other European peoples were enslaved during the medieval era. So Slavic people are Europeans. So this word slave literally comes from their name. You can't make this stuff up. Slav, Central and Eastern European peoples. Sclavius, right? The Sclavius or Avus. Medieval Latin form. Esclave or esclave. Old French pathway, right? Slave, English word for bondage. So that word comes from Slav, y'all. So in actuality, Europeans are the only ones who can truly be slaves, because they're the only ones who could be Slavic. Africans, African Americans, or Moors, Israelites, whatever the case may be, you're not Slavic unless you descend from them, right? Through rape or intermixing or intermarriage or something like that. Verbal evidence. The language itself remembers European enslavement. See? That's a dagger right there. So they were enslaved because their name says it. The word is a witness against the oversimplified claim, right? I'm going to say it again. The word is a witness against the oversimplified claim. And yeah, you heard me say against instead of against. That's like Brother Malcolm X would say on the movie and in his speeches. Anyway, I just thought that was funny. Malcolm X would say against, right? All right. Before the debate even begins, the vocabulary already exposes the weakness of the slogan. All right. Next. Ancient slavery was never one race history. Ancient Greece and Rome enslaved people from many regions and ethnic backgrounds. European tribes, Mediterranean peoples, Near Eastern populations, and conquered peoples from across the imperial world were pulled into bondage. All right, let me scoot over here a little bit. Ancient slavery was brutal, widespread, and multi-ethnic long before modern racial categories hardened. Now, no escape. The ancient record refuses to cooperate with a one-race slavery theory. And as a side note, there really is only one race, it's the human race. But there are multiple nations that the human race is divided into. So when people say different races, what they're really trying to say is different nations and or different tribes. But anyway, for simplicity, we're just saying different races, right? Black, white, African, European, whatever. His history was broad then, and the argument is still too narrow now. Now, Barbary and Ottoman captivity was direct white enslavement. North African raiders and Ottoman-linked systems captured large numbers of Europeans from the 16th through the 19th centuries. Coastal towns in Italy, Spain, France, Britain, and Iceland were hit by raids that fed slave markets and ransom systems. This is direct historical evidence that white Europeans were seized, trafficked, and held in bondage. This is the debate dagger. You understand? European whiteness did not stop chains, raids, sale, captivity, or forced labor. And what I mean by dagger, this is the knife that you kill their argument with, as if black people or African people are the only ones who was enslaved. So that means Deuteronomy 28 makes them Israelites. Well, I guess these Europeans might be Israelites too, huh? I don't think so. So that argument is done. White Europeans were not merely witnesses to slavery. Many were victims of it. Now, a lot of people don't like this history, right? Because they want to be the only person in the victim Olympics so they can pretend to be the only victims. You know I'm not minimizing my own people's slavery in the Americas, but I'm still not going to pretend that we're the only ones that went through it, because it's just not true. Now, ours was the most brutal over here in this region, but they went through some brutal stuff over there in that region. All right? Serfdom proves Europe had its own massive bondage system. So serfdom, all right? Let's see what's going on with that. Millions of Europeans lived under serfdom in medieval and early modern Europe, all right? Serfs were tied to land, controlled by landowners, and sharply restricted in movement, labor, and economic freedom. Serfdom was not always identical to chattel slavery, meaning like the slavery our people went to in America, right? But it was still a massive regime of coercion and inherited social control. Now, key point. Europe cannot be painted as standing outside large-scale bondage and unfree labor because they participated in it and they went through it. Long before modern America, Europe already had entrenched systems of coercive labor. All right, next. Early America had white unfree labor too. Let me see, let's scoot over just a little bit here. All right, in the 17th and 18th centuries, hundreds of thousands of Europeans came to the American colonies as indentured servants. Many were English, Scottish, Irish, and other Europeans working under harsh, dangerous, and deeply exploitative terms. Some entered voluntarily. Others were driven by poverty, punishment, coercion, or desperation. So, in other words, they were poor, and so they had to go into debt slavery, but they could get out of it. It wasn't lifelong. But do not dodge it, right? Don't dodge this fact. White unfree labor in early America is part of the record, whether a slogan likes it or not. So that's the facts. All right, let's continue. The record stays more complex than simple propaganda allows. Now, comparison is not confusion. Indentured servitude could be brutal, but it usually had a limited term and eventual legal release. All right, so they didn't put indentured servants in slavery their whole lives like they did black people, like they did the Moors, you understand? Because that's the proper name. Or like they did the Israelites, if you believe the biblical narrative, right? Because some of our people were known as Jews and or Israelites, all right? But we were also known as Moors, M-O-O-R-S, all right? Hereditary racial chattel slavery, and chattel means personal property, like you're owned by somebody, as if you're a thing and not a human. Hereditary racial chattel slavery was different. It became permanent, racialized, and passed to children by birth. So that is worse than indentured servitude. So the Europeans over here that were indentured servants, they suffered, but it was not like African or Moorish slavery over here, all right? It was not. A truthful presentation can acknowledge white bondage while still preserving the distinct horror of African chattel slavery. In other words, what you Europeans did to Africans, African Americans, black people, Moors, and those who call ourselves Israelites, whatever you want to label it, what you did to black people or African people in America was very brutal and distinctly horrifying. All right? So your indentured servitude over here is not on the same level as ours. But you did go to some form of slavery even over here, right? Because you were poor and some of y'all was in debt as well. Stay accurate. Recognizing white slavery is not the same as erasing black suffering. See, some people think when I put a video out like this, I'm trying to erase black suffering. Do not get it twisted. Our people's suffering is still noteworthy and should be respected and remembered and never repeated, all right? All I'm doing is showing you why you can't base your whole identity on Deuteronomy 28 as if you're the only one that went through a form of slavery. That's it and that's all. A strong argument keeps both comparison and distinction in view. All right? What the record actually proves. So here's what we know. White people were slaves too. Yes, they were. Many peoples were slaves too. Yes, that's true. Slavery has crossed races, religions, empires, continents, and centuries. That is also true. That is exactly why slavery alone cannot function as an exclusive marker of identity, prophecy, or divine status. And that's the point. So stop telling black people or African American people in the United States, you Israelite camps, stop telling them they're cursed, because they're not. Black people in this country were enslaved because of the greedy Europeans who enslaved them, because they didn't want to do the work themselves and they wanted free labor. That's it and that's all. Verdict. The historical marker is too common to prove an exclusive claim. Now, a broad human tragedy cannot be turned into a narrow ethnic fingerprint. Now that is true. So, what this does not erase, it does not erase the transatlantic enslavement of Africans. It does not deny the racial brutality of American chattel slavery. It does not excuse oppression or cheapen anyone's suffering. It simply refuses the false move of pretending slavery happened to one race alone. That's what we're doing here. Nothing more, nothing less. So stay honest. The goal is correction, not minimization. The goal is truth, not erasure. Now, next here, historical correction is not historical denial. All right? Now, why the Israelite claim breaks. So here we go. If the argument is, quote, our people were enslaved, therefore we alone match the identity, end quote, the argument breaks under the weight of history. Point blank, period. Why? White Europeans were enslaved. Slavs were enslaved. Europeans were raided. Europeans lived under serfdom. Europeans served as indentured laborers. Slavery proves oppression. It does not automatically prove exclusive bloodline identity. All right? So here's the argument failure. A standard that proves too much cannot prove one group alone. That's it and that's all. Now, once the full record is admitted, the exclusive claim loses its force. So here's the final verdict. All right? Here's the final verdict of this. White people were slaves too. That does not make every white person an Israelite. And it does not make slavery trivial, right? So this doesn't make it okay what Europeans or what white people did to Africans or Moors or Israelites in this country. It does prove that slavery is not exclusive evidence for any group's identity claim. That's what it does prove. So blacks in America might be Israelites or they might be Africans, right? Matter of fact, they are Africans and they are Moors. That's a fact. The only question is, are they Israelites too? All right? The truthful conclusion is stronger than the slogan. Human bondage has many victims across history. So, this is the closing blow to that argument. If the proof is this common, it is not exclusive proof at all. So you had slavery all over the earth. It wasn't just so-called African Americans or black people in the United States, though that was a horrible, tragic form of slavery, worse than any other in the Americas. But that Israelite claim is destroyed, y'all. So stop saying that black people are cursed according to Deuteronomy 28 for some sins that the ancient Israelites committed thousands of years ago. No, the slavery in the Americas was because white people or Europeans were greedy and they wanted free labor, and slavery was the best way for them to run their businesses with low overhead costs. You understand? Because these greedy corporations today, a lot of them don't like to pay fair wages for labor either. So I hope this has been some edification to you. This is about education, not hating any particular group. I don't hate anybody, whether you are Israelite or Moor, whether you are Caucasian, European, whether you are African, Hamite, whatever the case may be. I'm just trying to put the truth out. So with that, I'm going to say peace, be blessed, and have a good day.